Outside of Street Fighter and the Capcom vs. series, there has been one fighting game on fans' minds, Darkstalkers. It was recently stated that a past renewal project for the Darkstalkers series was cancelled, which is heartbreaking. Now, I wonder what that roster would have been like. Well, since they haven't leaked anything, I'll be making my dream roster for the game. So, let's get into it. Darkstalkers is one of Capcom's fighting series that people want a sequel for. As we seen back on 2012 with the Darkstalkers Are Not Dead trailer, it is about time that they renew the series for us. With the Street Fighter VI director stating that he was one of the people working on the project, it really got me thinking about who was chosen for the roster. They had to have made some new character or pulled characters from other Darkstalkers material outside of the games. Well, that is what I am going to do a little bit for this roster. Since this game only has a small number of playable characters, it is a must-do because I want this roster to have 40 to 50 characters, so with that being said, it'll shoot for 48 characters. Dream roster. The launch roster will feature 24 characters. Now I know they would have probably had 16 to 18 for the launch, but this number would be more appealing for fans. The first 4 characters on my returning launch roster are Donovan Bane, Dmitry Maximov, Morrigan Insulin, and Shinko. I would expect these characters to play as fun as they have always been. Morrigan would have Lilith included in her Darkness Illusion Super and in 1 or 2 new special moves. The next 4 returning characters are John Talbane, Felicia, Baby Bonnie Hood, and Huitzel. The only thing I would like to see is Dark Talbane influencing 1 or 2 of Talbane's old or new moves to show that his dark side is present but is being controlled or almost rid of it, similar to Ryu's Shinshoryu from MVC Infinite. The following 4 returning characters are Victor von Gerdenhain, Sasquatch, Bishamon, and Anakaris. Bishamon would be the different one in this bunch. Now that the Amor is held together by a created body, some of his moves would change to reflect the true nature of the Demon Amor and the Blade. The last 4 returning characters are Lord Raptor, QB, Shadow, and Marionette. In this bunch, Shadow and Marionette would be the ones to get an overhaul on their playstyle. Marionette would gain control of her own body while having the ability to take control of the enemy during her super moves or special moves. Her backstory is that with Jada's defeat, she is bombarded with stolen souls and gained sentience. Now she is on a quest to understand who she is and why she has a desire to harm others. Shadow would be similar to Seth from the Street Fighter series, but reflect a personality and goals like his Udon Comics version of himself. After Jada's defeat, he absorbs some of the stolen souls and now has his own ambitions of ruling the human world. Since this is a sequel to Darkstalkers 3, we have to have new playable characters. This series doesn't really have a lot of new playable characters added, so I will stay true to that. Plus, making a whole lot of new characters would be slightly different for me in the amount of time I had to make this video. The new playable characters for the launch roster are Oboro Bishamon and Mei Ling. Oboro would have his armorless form and mostly new move set since he was able to get rid of the armor. His story would consist of sealing the armor back into the demon realm since it created a new body. Mei Ling would be more like Tong Pu and Chun-Li, but able to use the training that her mom gave her and talismans for her attacks. Her story is that when her and her sister returned from the battle with Jada, they continued their lives. As the few years passed, they slowly started gaining their memories and all their powers. Once they turned 19, they had gained control over these new powers and no longer needed to become one mind, one body to do so. She and her sister now join the Dark Hunters organization and prepare for the upcoming battle for Earth. Teen Anita and Deers. Anita's playstyle would be a combination of Rose and Jean Grey without the Dark Phoenix powers. Her story would be knowing that Donovan can be erased by Dee at any second now, constantly looking for the power to rid Dee from Donovan. She is trained by an old gypsy and later a coven of witches. Now that her training is done, she is ready to confront Donovan to save him like he saved her. Deers is from a Darkstalkers comic and is the child of Dimitri and Felicia. His playstyle would include a gun, other weapons, and some moves he learned during his training as a Dark Hunter. He would be like the Belmonts from the Castlevania series. For his story, I would definitely take away Felicia being his mother and making a woman Dimitri fell for when he first gained his full power and control back living in the human world, but quickly forgot about her. When she disappeared after hearing this is the one who has been killing the women in her village. She gives him up to a family of Dark Hunters and leaves only to meet her doom at the hands of Dimitri. He now wants revenge on the vampire. This game would be preparing him to take a lead role with Anita for the future of the series. Koenig Genius and a brand new character named May Van Helsing. Koenig is a character I came across while reading through the second volume of the Comic Gamist Vampire Hunter manga. He is the greatest creation of Heinrich Bauer, a scientist who is a rival to Professor Gerdenheim and wants to challenge his creations with his own one, Koenig. He is now upgraded and ready for combat. His playstyle would be like Vector from Plasma Sword and Sentinel from Marvel vs. Capcom series. May Van Helsing is a descendant of the Van Helsing family, the oldest and first Dark Hunters to have lived. Nu is the newest warrior ready to bring down the evil Darkstalkers her family has been hunting for hundreds of years. She would play like similar to other Van Helsing characters from other game series with a combination of weapons and a power not presented in those other games. Amingo and Ruby Hart. The original characters from Marvel vs. Capcom 2. I think they fit well into the game, and this is a chance to get them into another game to be played. Amingo's backstory would be the same, except for not joining Ruby on this quest and going off on his own to end the Cursed Wind. Ruby Hart's backstory would show her as being pulled into the future as she hunts for magical powerful item Seal. When she is pulled into this new era, she ventures off to find the new powerful item she senses. This gets her involved in the current battles as some of the characters have knowledge of what this artifact is. These characters are what the main story would revolve around, while the DLC characters would be places into the story but still be canon to it as side story at first, but eventually the second half of the story being added as DLC or chapter DLC characters. Now, the last characters are obviously going to be downloadable content. More deep diving went into finding characters that already exist that could be put into this game, while still inputting some more new characters. This game would have 6 seasons of DLC related to the first chapter and the second chapter. The first season of DLC characters called Ancient Enemies are Dracula, Morgan Le Fay, the Pumpkinhead character from Capcom's Super League Online cancelled game, who I call Jack-O-Lantern, and Tessa. Each of these characters have connections to one or more characters in the launch roster, showing their side story and building into the second chapter of the game. The Season 2 of DLC characters called Otherworld Visitors are Baraba, Rikuo, Firebrand from the Ghosts and Goblins series, and a brand new angel character I call Eva. Besides Rikuo, these fighters come from a different place that are not Earth and look for or has a connection to a character from the launch roster as well as others. Their side stories continue to build up into the Chapter 2 DLC story. I just realized that Rikuo is here by mistake and would switch places with Ruby Hart. The Season 3 of DLC characters called Invading Mortals are Mugen Imawano from Project Justice, Zombie Belder from Final Fight Revenge, Akuma from Super Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition, and Cat Lady Beauty from Cannon Spike Gun Spike. Because of the supernatural nature of these characters, I believe they will fit just fine in this game. They also will have connections to the launch roster, with their side stories showing this and building into the second chapter. The Season 4 of DLC characters called Otherworld Invaders are Oda Nobunaga from the Onimusha series, Gomez from El Dorado Gate, Michelle Hart from Legendary Wings, and Dante from the Devil May Cry series. These fights would have been brought here through a time-space phenomenon from their worlds to this one. They would gain rivalry with some of the characters from the launch roster and DLC crew. Their side story would build into the second chapter while being the final setup for the second chapter's events. The Season 5 of DLC characters called Creatures of Chaos are all new to the series and come with the second chapter. These characters are Zealous, White Horseman of Conquest, Marcius, Red Horseman of War, Lemos, Purple Horseman of Famine, and Moros, Black Horseman of Death. These characters show that the apocalypse has arrived on the Earth and the balance of rather Earth lives or dies is on the line. All the Darkstalkers and Hunters team up to save the world against the end times. Their side stories show that they are the cause of events in the first game, 3 games, and the main story, and have always been around. The Season 6 of DLC characters called What Ifs would be an extra season. These characters are Neo Cyborg from the Street Fighter series. He would be the explanation of why Seth gained one of Dimitri's moves in Street Fighter V. D. Donovan's alternate self. He would tell the other half of Donovan's story of what happened when he returned from Jada's dimension. Jada Doma, who would tell what happened after his defeat in Darkstalkers 3. And Pyron, who would tell what happened after his defeat in Darkstalkers Revenge. These characters wouldn't truly be in the story, but provide lore that leads up to the main story. Like Huitzel actually being triggered by Zealous to call Pyron. Marcius being the one to help make sure that all the characters went over into Jada's realm. And Lemos being the cause of the death winds that surged around the globe in the main story of the game, causing Donovan to change into D for an extended amount of time. That is my dream roster, but I like a good final boss in the fighting games I play, so let's go over that as an addition to this roster. Final boss. Now, if you haven't figured it out, this storyline would be on Earth with the Darkstalkers getting caught into the prophecy of the apocalypse. With that being said, the final boss would be a new character called Chaos. This would be an ancient being, an evil demigod of sorts that was around from the creation of Earth, waiting till it was time to destroy the world and the whole universe to be restarted. He would be known as the Living Big Bang. This would be the perfect after what everyone went through dealing with Jada, who tried to restart the universe himself. I don't have a design for him yet, but still wanted to put out the idea I was thinking. OUTRO. I had fun coming up with this roster. I actually found a lot of characters when going through mangas and Chinese comics. This got my mind thinking of my first idea of having THR Darkstalkers series be rebooted and how that would be a cool thing for Capcom to do when bring this series back from the dead. Well, until next time, Warriors.